Whether it's a learning disorder, an emotional concern, bullying, or social problems, kids need adults who can help them meet these challenges. Find out more about helping kids succeed in school next on Speak Your Mind. Welcome to Speak Your Mind. I'm Dr. Carolyn Phelps, licensed psychologist with the Human Development Center. And I have to say that from time to time, this show has an eerie synchronicity with world events. I'm talking, of course, about the 14-year-old Pakistani girl, Malala, who was shot because of her dedication to the notion that girls deserve to be educated. Humbling, isn't it? So Malala, we're dedicating this show to you. Right now, we're taking your questions on helping boys and girls succeed in school. So pick up that telephone and call the numbers on your screen. Locally, dial 218-788-2844 or call toll-free at 1-877-307-8762. And you can also text us your questions or email them using the number or address listed at the bottom of your screen. We're going to start by introducing our guests. Paul Goossens is a licensed psychologist at Harbor City Psychological Associates. For the past 18 years, he's collaborated with area schools providing school-based mental health services. Phyllis Cook worked as a therapist before joining the Proctor School District 10 years ago as a school social worker. She works with K-12 students, often with students whose behaviors are affecting their academic success. And Dr. Ed Nemi is a licensed psychologist and director of the outpatient therapy programs at the Human Development Center's Lake and Cook County offices. His work includes the assessment and treatment of school-aged children and supervising school-based clinicians. Thanks to all of you for being here this evening. And I want to continue the story a little bit about Malala because at the age of 11, she was writing a diary which the BBC has published and which I will I'll send that out on my blog, the link for that, because it's really a good read. And in one of the entries, she mentions the fact, and she's kind of lamenting the fact that the Taliban has reopened the school for boys but not girls. And she's sad about that, and then she makes this comment, and my brother hasn't done his homework yet, which has kind of made me think that we're all more the same than we are different. But I think that that's a good starting point, the notion of doing homework. And Paul, we're going to start with you this evening, of what can parents do to begin to set the stage for their kids in terms of learning how to be good students and instilling kind of good habits?
Well, I think, you know, and you're talking about Malala in her case, that we've got levels from the culture and community level to the family community to the individual. And I think as a family that starts early on. I mean, even from reading to the little ones when they're small, just getting that culture of education and the value of education and learning, and that learning is fun and learning should be enjoyable. And I think if that starts at a young age, you know, we can help prevent some of the sort of the homework battles. But I think at that young elementary age, being engaged and setting those expectations of working with your child, and just having that a regular part of the family rhythm and the ritual of the family, and just so that it's normal. And I think starting at a really young age, but it's not really homework; it's learning.
So he makes a good point, Phyllis, that the difference between kind of even framing it as homework versus learning. What would you say to a parent? What would you add about that?
I often tell parents that they need to be involved with their kids' lives, and that sometimes it's really hard to work it in, but you need to set aside time as much as you can, and I like to say every day. I do think that when learning's a culture in the home, as Paul said, it becomes part of the rhythm. And but for some people, it's not, and so it's like setting aside time every day.
And so part of that is making that a priority. And in this day and age, Ed, it seems that we have lots of pressures on us coming from lots of different places that can detract away from that and make school seem like an afterthought.
Well, school should be a place where you can have enjoyment and passion. It should be talked about as a way in which kids can have fun in learning. It can be an adventure. And schools need to be in partnership with parents, and parents with schools. I mean, it's really interesting if you watch through the years. Most of the partnership starts in kindergarten, first and second grade. Kids, parents come to watch kids in different programs. But as they get into high school, that partnership breaks apart. So you need to have a partnership where they're both wanting to have the children enjoy learning, look forward to learning, asking questions. What does this mean? What could this mean? What does this mean in my everyday life? That's really critical. So it's not like it's work, it's like it's fun. It's enjoying things.
Now, we've been talking a little bit about sort of setting a culture for learning and a culture for valuing education. How do you know when your child is beginning to show problems in school and in learning, Ed, that maybe need a little bit more attention?
And I do think one of the things that happens with problems is problems don't just crop up one time. They're a pattern. It's happened for a long time. You may start seeing more avoidance. You may start seeing more crying, like they're hiding their homeworks. One of the really important skills in school is reading. And if children have trouble reading, and everybody picks up their ability to read at different paces, but they get compared. In school, you're always compared to somebody else. And sometimes their development may not be ready that they're going to be on pace with the other kids. And they see that. And their grades show that they get compared. And so kids start getting discouraged. They may have trouble sleeping. They may have stomach aches. They may start having other physical problems. They begin to get anxious. And those are all indications that, well, what's happening? What's changed? And to have a dialogue, to try to help kids to understand where their struggles are.
Now, Phyllis, when it's the school who's bringing it to the parents' attention that your child's having difficulty in classes, and maybe even to the level of we think your child should be evaluated, talk a little bit about that, what the teachers are maybe seeing in that case.
Well, the conversation most of the time begins with the teacher and the parent. And then that's where, if the teacher wants additional help, that's where I come in, guidance counselors come in, and we talk to the parents. And often in the beginning of the school year, we use a conference time, elementary through high school. And we use a conference time to bring some of these concerns to the parents. And then we maybe set 6 weeks. And then in 6 weeks, we'll look at it again, and then we'll implement some different stages of an intervention that could be working.
And if things aren't working, and a teacher is suggesting to a parent, I think you need to have your child tested. And sometimes parents are a little queasy about that as a notion. I'm afraid my child's going to be labeled. I don't want my child to have something wrong. Talk a little bit about that, Paul.
You know, I think that apprehension is real normal and real typical, and I see that a lot when folks come, bring children to me for that testing or evaluation. And initially I really try to work hard to put their mind at ease that there may be a number of factors that are going on to help or to create some of those difficulties. And as Ed said, I think that that dialogue with the school, generally there's some ideas already that have sort of percolated up through the teacher, through the social worker, through the folks at school, so that by the time they might come to see Ed or myself for evaluation, we've got some sense of what some of those questions or concerns are. And from a psychologist standpoint, I think we really need to step back and look at the whole picture to best understand what are all those factors that do need to come together to have a successful learning situation. And it could be learning issues or stress or struggles in the family or bullying or just a variety of things. So we really need to take a comprehensive look, but mostly to help put the parents at ease that you know, we're just going to take our time and understand what Junior can need.
In addition to what Paul was saying, I think a lot of times parents have a fear that when you test, you're going to find something wrong with the child. Really good testing should also point out what their strengths are. And everybody has strengths and weaknesses, and how to be able to work that out with each individual. That becomes really, really critical. So I think parents should also have the expectation of what are my child's strengths and how can that help in their learning. So if they do have a problem, let's say they have a reading problem, and maybe they have terrible phonics skills, and they're just not wired for phonics skills, but they have a great memory, so then you develop up a sight vocabulary. So you try to build on strengths. So you want to talk about strengths, not that they're going to come away with a label, or not that we're going to tell them they have to be medicated, but what can they actually do with their abilities? Real, real important.
I think I love that idea that that you can go to a psychologist and find out some good things about yourself too, not just what's wrong with you, and that's true for adults too. You know, we don't just tell you the bad things and what's wrong. Mostly people kind of know those things anyway naturally. We have a ton of calls here. I think we should start getting to some of them. A man from Superior says, my student is not a straight A kid, but I still want him to have reasonable goals. How do we set those goals? And how do we make them reasonable? Phyllis.
Well, you work with the student, and you begin small, meaning your goals are good, but you probably have 2 or 3, and then you develop them from there. But you begin small.
So starting small.
Yep.
And having reasonable goals,
right?
That the student feels like they have some reasonable chance of being successful at, so you can build on this pattern of success then. Now, I want to go back and get to this notion that you kind of raised when you were answering the last question, which is just because a teacher suspects that your child has learning problems, your child may not have learning problems. They might be having some stressor over here that is affecting their learning. And I think I want to talk a little bit about barriers to learning, and tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. I mean, they can be a wide range of things that can get in the way. If we think about what learning is, you know, in terms of bringing information in, decoding it, understanding it, storing it, retrieving it, I mean, there are a lot of things that can get in the way of that. You know, learning problems, reading disabilities or other learning disabilities, ADHD sorts of things, and the stress. You know, things that either impact that processing and storage and retrieval, or things that just drain our mental energy. That just our batteries are drained, and we're not able to be present. And that could be anything from illnesses, stress, allergies, all sorts of things that can affect that brain functioning. And so that's part of where I think both the psychologists and social workers working together with families, working with medical doctors to really best try to sift out what those factors may be. And equally important, I think, what factors may not be present there. So we can kind of hone in a little bit more and help the family hone in on what supports Junior might need.
Talk a little bit about the home environment and how the home environment can affect students' learning.
Coming back to the viewer's question too, I mean, the viewer asked about my student isn't a straight A student. There's a lot of effort that gets paid on grades. Yeah. And from home point of view is how do they evaluate how their child's learning? There's an interesting study that came out, and it looked at valedictorians. Valedictorians were thought to be the most successful students out of a class. And what they found out is 50% were very successful. There were 50% of BC students who became hugely successful. They just never showed their talent. They never had the passion. They never got clicked in. And so it's about teaching them that they can learn, that they can succeed, that they have the abilities. It's not just about the grades. It's about that ability to stick to that creative nature, that you can do it when you want to. And sometimes that's a real problem in schools because some kids show us that they don't want to.
I think that that's a really good point, though, because I think what you're talking about, Ed, is teaching kids how to be more process focused than outcome focused.
absolutely.
And our educational system is kind of focused, pulls naturally to be outcome focused. So let's get back to this question, though, home environment and the effect on kids.
Well, I work a lot with students who have a lot of difficulties in their home environment. And as Paul was describing, a lot of things that can affect the learning, it can also be affected by drug use, divorce, a death of someone who the student's very close to. That can all affect a learning for a child, and you know it takes a while for them to get it processed, to get it through the system of this affects how you are thinking, and what small steps can we do day by day until you get through whatever it is, whether it's divorce or whether it's drug issues.
Because it's hard to learn algebra when your house is on fire,
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Right.
And oftentimes people might be referred to me for the testing, and I might find myself saying, you know, let me take some time. Let me meet, and I work a lot with teenagers. And typically by then maybe learning disabilities, those really overt things are already well known or documented in elementary age. But oftentimes I'll find myself saying, let me meet with Junior a couple of times, a few times. Let me unfold the story with him or her to help understand what some of those processes are, and before we dive in with testing. And there's time for that, but let's unfold the story a bit first.
Here's a question from a woman in Duluth. Ed, my first grade child doesn't seem to be a morning person. How do I get this child into the routine of going to school and enjoying it every morning?
Well,
This is Stump the Star here.
Well, I do think there is a lot about what are their nighttime rituals, what are their nighttime getting ready, being able to wind down times. You know, maybe younger children have story times, but getting into that habit, and it's particularly noticeable when you go from summer vacation starting into school. But that also talks about the culture of the home. What's happening in the home at that time? Is the home also winding down? Is the home kind of nurturing that ability to kind of wind down? It's time to go to sleep and time to get up in the morning. So there's a family component to that. But it very much gets into that routine. What's the routine to wind down at night? I think it's very, very helpful.
And if a fourth grader has hockey practice until 10 o'clock at night, good luck getting them up and enjoying the morning.
The
right?
brain doesn't work that way.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Here's another question. Phyllis, I'll ask you. This was texted into us from far, far away. What should be done about a kid who misbehaves at school but not at home?
Well, not at home. All right. Very good. This is a switch because often, you know, I have students who misbehave at school and at home. So, I mean, we need to ask, we need to evaluate first. And by evaluation, I'm not talking any informal evaluation. We just need to find out from the student. And most of the time, students are very forthright. They'll tell us what's going on, and then we go from there.
I love that. I mean, the simple ask the student.
That's
then.
right. Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's where we get, you know, are there issues going on in school, or pressures, or social concerns or issues, or bullying, or do I fit in or not fit in, as well as even at home. Sometimes it might be, well, you know, Junior acts fine at home, but if everybody's playing video games and watching TV and disengaged, Junior may not be acting fine, but we may not be aware that Junior's, you know, having difficulty at home.
And I also want to say that we have parents come in and they'll say, gee, we just don't see this behavior at home. This is just really unusual. And then as we talk to them over the length of an hour, they do see these problems, but they don't realize that it's causing problems for a lot of the students at school.
That's an excellent point. Becky from Lino Lakes. Should I tell my child's school about his mental health diagnosis? What are the advantages and disadvantages to this, Paul?
Okay. That's a great question, and one that we field and process frequently in our office. You know, some of that may depend on the age of the child, but I think we go back to, you know, Ed spoke earlier about that dialogue between family, parents, and school. In some ways, if that dialogue has been going on, that's not a surprise, and that's just a continuation of that relationship. A relationship ideally and theoretically, you know, that's based on mutual trust and working. And so if there's a dynamic like that's been nurtured, I think by all means that makes sense too, because the school is such a and the school professionals are such a critical change agent in that child's life, to really be part of that extended treatment team, if it were. So I tend to default toward involving and having the parents engage in that conversation with the school.
And we now have there are a lot of schools sort of across the region that now have either some call it school-linked mental health services, some call it school-based mental health services, and I know you supervise people in those programs. Ed, tell us a little bit about those services and how they can help kids with some mental health problems.
Well, we actually have some of the services that are ranging. We have some pre-referral services where when we work with kids who do not need to be diagnosed, these are early signs. And we get into being able to get into a program for kindergarten through second grade called Superflex. And Superflex is, they're a superhero and it's a social skills game, how to get along with other people. And with more of the middle school and high schoolers, if they begin to see changes in behaviors, teachers can consult with mental health professionals, can ask those questions. They can get information. Is this anxiety? Is this maybe that there's some bullying going on? Maybe there's some racism that's happening that does take place. People don't like talking about those kinds of issues. But boy, it really does impact the kids. And part of that is to try to help sort that out. When Phyllis talked earlier about doing that assessment, it's really doing a question. It's really trying to understand in the child's perspective what's impacting their life, rather than our assuming that.
I love that idea too of early intervention and the notion of let's kind of get at problems while they're small, before they're big. Phyllis, a woman from Hermantown asked, "My child is not very popular and struggles socially. What can I do to build my child's self-esteem?"
Well, to me, just love this child in all of his or her interests, whatever it is that they are good at, embrace that and love that child. And the social skills, I don't know how old this child is, but I would guess that the social skills will probably come as the child gets older. Somehow I felt this was a younger child. And maybe get the child involved in something like Scouts or something outside of the home that would increase their social skills. And as far as...
And also then give them a broader social network too, right? Where they're meeting kids, they're still meeting kids and they have the ability to interact with children, but in a different venue that's not just school-based.
Very much so. And if the family can support that and encourage that and kind of nudge some of that along, then it might be, you know, inviting, you know, somebody else over to the house or well, who, you know, the new movie's out or the haunted ship. Who might you invite to come along with us, and we'll take it. So I think there's a lot of things as a family we might be able to help sort of nurture and encourage those contacts.
If it's a younger child, one of the things that's really valuable is their imaginative ability, because it takes it away from the pressure of will they like me or not. But you can use imagination, you can use play, and even when they're with other kids to play. And some of that can be structured, but it can be very, very helpful in teaching about that give and take, that being a friend, that being a companion in doing that. You can have fun learning these things. It's not like sitting down and, oh, Paul, this is what you have to do today.
Yeah. That's so artificial. Yeah.
We have time for one more question, Paul. A man from Iron River calls in and asks, at what point should I realistically consider allowing my child to pursue online school instead of going to school?
Ooh, Good question, big question. I think for some families and some children, students, online is a wonderful resource. I'm not sure that there's an easy answer to that. It's a simple question with complexity, because I think it's looking at what are the other social networks for the child and the age of the child, what are the learning needs and ability, what are the abilities of the families to really be involved with that online experience. So that might be something to, consult with other families that may have done that, consult with professionals perhaps, to really problem solve that.
That's what I would say too,
Yeah.
is that is not a question you want to answer by yourselves, that you
No,
probably
not at
want to
all.
you probably want to
Yeah.
get some outside help, even in getting the school's perspective
Absolutely.
about that. We are done for the night. And so, just as a reminder, this dedication goes out to Malala, a young girl who fought for her own education in a way that has had such serious consequences. I hope that reminds us of how fortunate we are in this country to have access to free education, whether you're a boy or a girl. You had a wonderful tips here from these wonderful guests about how to help your child be successful in school. So thanks to all of you for being here, and don't forget to visit us on the web at speakyourmindonline.org, where you can find a schedule of our topics and resource links, and read my blog, the place where I answer more of your questions. And you can also email us your questions about next week's show, when we'll be talking about depression and how to get help for it. I'm Dr. Carolyn Phelps. Thanks for watching, and good night.